Let me know when you started the recording. There we go. So our first order of business is public comments. We have 18 speakers signed up to speak today. As previously, we will recognize those folks in the order in which they signed up to speak. Our first speaker is Jared Burgoon. And let me just review before I start you, Jared. Everyone will have 3 minutes, and Mr. Whitaker will start the timer when you start. So with that said, I'll recognize Mr. Burgoon.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
Jared,
April.
I'm sorry. Katie's on, but she's not listed as a panelist. Can we get her moved up?
I'm looking for her.
I see her.
Thank you. Sorry, Jared.
You're good. I'll let y'all finish before I start.
Thank you.
You find her, Jeff?
She should, well,
All right, Mr. Burgoon.
she should be joining.
There she is.
All right, we have Katie with us now. Hi, Katie. All right, Mr. Burgoon, I'm going to start you over now. You have 3 minutes. Please take the floor. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I always tend to like stories. And so with my mother being a dyslexic teacher, that's the direction I went. So this is a hypothetical situation, and there's a parent to twins in the 3rd grade. Both have been showing great aptitude in school until reading became more intense. When this happened, one of the twins started showing frustration and a lack of comprehension. The other flourished. Their teachers suggested that the school test for dyslexia for the twin who was struggling, as the school has a program that they can greatly assist with their reading comprehension. Wanting the child to succeed, the parent agrees to testing. Upon conclusion of testing, it is confirmed that the child has dyslexia, and the school will be willing to assist the student through their specialized dyslexia program. The program doesn't fix the child's dyslexia immediately, but over the next 2 years, the student becomes more confident in their reading and is closer to their twin in relation to their reading comprehension. Did the parent pick a winner or a loser? Did the addition of the program allow for the twin who was lacking to get closer to the one who was thriving? Does the imposition of an across-the-board impact fee allow for the parts of our city that are, quote, less desirable to be built upon the opportunity to grow? Does the parent of this city need to make a sweeping impact fee, or do they need to allow the areas of the city who are not as, quote, desirable to have a specialized rate or no rate at all, so that they have the resources to slowly grow and become closer to the other parts of the city that are more desirable? I encourage y'all to think about this as you are the parent of the city. You are the ones that are suggesting to the city council how these impact fees should be given. I was glad that y'all included 2 areas with 0 impact fees, but it hurt my heart to see that the east and the north side of Lubbock were not included in those areas. Those are areas that have been neglected in the past. And even if it wasn't us that chose that, if we, just as the parent didn't choose that their student would have dyslexia, we are invested, and we need to be invested in making sure that the other parts of the town have the same opportunities that we do. Therefore, I asked the committee to recommend maximum impact fees in areas A, F, and E, the, quote, desirable portions of the town, and for no impact fees for the developments in areas B, C, D, H, and G, some of the, quote, less desirables. Thank you for your time, and I will let y'all go on.
Mr. Burgoon, thank you for being with us. I'll now recognize Kirsten Lips. Kirsten, are you with us? I'll come back around a second time.
I saw her name on there, Thomas.
Okay.
Hey, Thomas, give me a little second. I'm actually remote, and it takes a little longer on my mouse to get people recognized.
Okay. Kirsten, bear with us a minute.
She's on now.
Yes,
All right,
can you hear me now?
You have the floor. Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. My name is Kirsten Lips. I am a lifelong resident of Lubbock. I have a master's in public administration, 10 years of teaching experience, and I'm a former employee of Lubbock ISD. During my time with LISD, I witnessed firsthand the disparity recently reported within Lubbock. I did not find it surprising. As an LISD teacher, I had students sitting in my classroom who, at any given time, were living without running water or electricity, students who relied on food pantries, and more than a handful who were homeless. The simple fact is, many families in Lubbock cannot afford for life to get more expensive than it already is. For the sake of these families, for my students, I am imploring this committee to recommend imposing maximum impact fees for new developments in areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for new developments in the areas B, C, D, H, and G. Thus far, this committee has ignored its duties in many ways, but you have an opportunity to change that and make Lubbock a better place for every citizen. Thank you.
Ms. Lips, thank you. Ms. Whitaker, we'll recognize Don Holliday next.
I don't see a Don Holiday.
All right, we'll come back around a second time. With that, I'll recognize Joshua Shankles.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You have the floor, Mr. Shankles.
Committee, I again come before you to ask you to reconsider your approach to impact fee implementation in Lubbock. I'm advocating specifically for the assignment of maximum impact fees for service areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees across the other service areas. I should say, if we can't bring this committee to agreement on this issue, we'll really have no choice but to try to kill this recommendation before it goes to City Council. I'm going to take a moment to dismantle some of the rationales that have been offered by this committee for their approach so far. First, as highlighted by the 2020 Land Use and Assumption Capacity Plans for Impact Fees report, and one would assume the animating factor behind studying the implementation of impact fees in the first place, given the bullet on page 7, not only is the cost of the city's growth anticipated to outstrip the current methods of funding infrastructure projects, but enactment of the impact fee policy is the most predictable, transparent, flexible, equitable, and proportional way to ensure that new development in out-of-field areas pay for the creation of infrastructure necessitated by the same said developments. Rationales given in the SEAC meetings by committee members who we know are constituents of the developer community and who have the most profit to lose in the enactment of impact fees was nothing more substantial than maybe we shouldn't go for more and just see what happens. And no one is quite sure what things are going to play out in this economic downturn. This is tantamount to the unilaterally giving yourself a discount on what amounts to the bill written by the current residents of the city and issued to the developer community. Although you voted to recommend water and wastewater be an eligible category for the imposition of impact fees, you also voted to set the initial rate at 0. As above, this is an impermissible shirking of your cost of doing business. It is also inequitable as the cost of infrastructure projects planned for new developments will be outsourced to the current ratepayers. It is self-evident that the overwhelming majority of new development has been thoughtlessly and inequitably aggregated in developments to the south and west of the city of Lubbock. Because of the realities of transportation, access to credit, and historic disenfranchisement in the city, this puts the, quote, opportunity of Southwest Lubbock's development literally out of reach for many Lubbockites. Historic practices of discrimination and disenfranchisement have set up certain conditions for the residents of East and North Lubbock. It is from those conditions that our current neighborhoods and the current conditions therein arose. Indeed, the past isn't over, it isn't even past, which is to say it will require deliberate intervention in the form of strategies that incentivize development in those areas to correct for historically and frankly ongoing wrongs. The sprawl of Lubbock is already quite great for its population. This creates the condition for several negative environmental impacts, including increased fuel consumption from longer commutes, a larger, hotter urban heat island from more roadways and parking lots, the encroachment and displacement of natural areas and the wildlife therein. Therefore, we should be incentivizing in-field development and enacting policies that generate more urban density. Finally, I feel like we're leaving tools on the table. The pretense of your recommendation for across-the-board discount was justified as not picking winners and losers. However, it is both the mandate and the responsibility of this committee to create the conditions that ensure prosperity for all of Lubbock's neighborhoods. It is therefore appropriate and just to incentivize development in areas where it has lagged and disincentivize it in areas of problematic expansion. I thank the committee for their time and consideration and do hope you will reconsider your recommendations as they stand. Thank you.
Mr. Shankles, thank you. Mr. Whitaker, where is our timer?
The timer is going to be coming on now. I couldn't do both screens and promote disabled people, so now it's coming on.
There we go. So thank you, Mr. Shankles. I'll recognize Ann Horton next. Ms. Horton?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. My name is Ann Wharton, and I am a resident of Lubbock and a proud tech graduate. I'm also now a PhD student at Tech and have 4 years of experience in local community arts organizations. At the last CEC meeting, this committee ignored over 70 voices from our community and called for reductions on impact fees in new single-family housing, apartment complexes, and other non-residential developments in areas A, F, and E in Lubbock South and Southwest. I'm here today to again urge the committee to recommend maximum impact fees for new developments in areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for developments in areas within the loop 289. Much of the new growth in Lubbock South and Southwest has been fueled by what is effectively a regressive tax on citizens in Old Lubbock or neighborhoods within 289. This tax robs resources from residents of the city, especially in minority communities, and enables developers to widen profit margins while ignoring the long-term economic burdens this places on established neighborhoods, such as my own neighborhood, Wheelock. Impact fees are one important tool among many that the city of Lubbock has to stop this exploitation, allowing the city to use its limited resources for urban renewal in neighborhoods that have seen steady decline. Even if the new subdivisions bring in property taxes in the beginning, we all know that they will not carry their weight when they begin to require maintenance. The same maintenance many Old Lubbock communities are in desperate need of today, but are not receiving because our resources are being used for the benefit of suburban developers. Vibrant downtown communities with innovative art scenes and robust local businesses are attracting people to move across Texas, not new subdivisions. Support communities that make Lubbock unique, like locally owned businesses on 34th Street, and stop robbing our future to fund suburban sprawl. For these reasons, I ask this committee to recommend imposing maximum impact fees for new developments in areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for new developments in areas B, C, D, H, and G. Thank you all so much for your time.
Ms. Wharton, thank you for your time. Next, I'll recognize Jake Reynolds.
I do not see a Jake Reynolds.
All right, I'll recognize Marissa Huerta.
Don't see a Marissa.
All right, I'll recognize Tom Macarone. Mr. Macarone.
There's no Tom.
Okay. I'll recognize Natalie Ayers.
There, she is on the list.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it looks like from a comment that Jacob Reynolds is with Ann Wharton, probably.
Okay. I will come back around and give everybody we missed a second chance after we
Okay.
get through the list.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Ms. Ayers, you have the floor.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Natalie Ayers, and I'm a longtime resident of Lubbock. I'm complete my double master's at Wayland Baptist, and due to COVID, I am now a full-time teacher. At the last SEAC meeting, there are over 70 citizens who individually yet collectively call for reductions on impact fees in new single-family housing, apartment complexes, and other non-residential developments in areas A, F, and E, and Lubbock South and Southwest. These citizens did the right thing and followed the rules established and resounded in one voice. It appears that after those orderly, passionate citizens spoke, it was as if their pleas went through one ear and out the other, and the committee was on to the next agenda. It would lead one to believe the decision had been made prior to them speaking, and their words were dead on arrival. I am here today following the procedure and attempting to do the right thing yet again, and urging the committee to recommend maximum impact fees for new developments in areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for developments in areas B, C, D, H, and G. What is believed is that these new subdivisions will bring in property taxes in the beginning. However, we all know that they will not continue to carry their own weight when maintenance is required, leaving that financial burden on communities that are in desperate need of restoration and maintenance. The reason those communities are not receiving that much needed maintenance is due to the exploitation of those resources that are being used in areas that are unaffordable and inaccessible. I must admit, at first glance of the roadway capacity plan map, it immediately brought to my memory redlining. Because of a legacy of discrimination, exclusion, and inequality, the past is the present. There were inequalities from the past and inequalities recreated every generation that are manufactured by local policies and fees. The million-dollar question is, should communities that has been obviously neglected, resources extracted from and given to shiny new areas, be made to pay for what will end up being the maintenance of those areas in which citizens, number one, cannot afford, and number two, have no access to? The answer is no. For these reasons, I ask this committee to recommend imposing maximum impact fees for new developments in the areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for new developments in areas B, C, D, H, and G. This is an opportunity for this community to do more than just things with their mouth, but actually put to action the things that the citizens are asking. I'm thankful for the community for your time. Thank you.
Ms. Ayers, thanks for being with us. I'll recognize Jim Beck next.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You have the floor.
Lubbock chose winners and losers long ago. May I read from ordinance number 223? No Negro or person of African descent or containing as much as 1/8 Negro blood shall own property or reside thereon in any part of the city except that lying south of 16th Street and east of Avenue C. And no person shall rent or lease to any such Negro or person of African descent or one containing as much as 1/8 Negro blood outside the territory limits as above. The fact that Negroes or persons of African descent and persons containing as much as 1/8 Negro blood are residing in various portions of this city, and their residence is dangerous to the health and pollutes the earth and atmosphere, creates an emergency and necessity that the removal of the charter requiring an ordinance to be read at 2 several meetings be suspended, and this ordinance be acted at the meeting of its introduction and effective upon publication, approved this 8th day of March, 1923, Percy Spencer, Mayor, City of Lubbock. I realize there are many who feel no accountability or ownership for the sins of our forefathers. However, a Christian perspective would remind us that confession and repentance are preceded by memory. Nonetheless, you today are making recommendations and advising on this side of history. And accountability and ownership does belong to each of you. And I realize you have probably already made up your minds, but for history's sake, may it go down in record. The decisions that you make are choosing winners and losers still, as it was 100 years ago. How you advise today will affect East and North Lubbock, sections B, D, C, H, and G for the forthcoming future. Therefore, I encourage you, think carefully concerning the advice you offer. History will remember you. Thank you.
Mr. Beck, thank you for being with us today. Next, I'll recognize Sarah Reed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Reed, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. My name is Sarah Reed. I have been a Lubbock resident for the past 10 years. I am a retired healthcare administrator. I lived in Lubbock as a child when 34th Street was our main street and 50th was just becoming the new town center. When I moved back to Lubbock 50 years later, it was sadly apparent that retaining and maintaining much of the charm and attraction of the old Lubbock I had known had been sacrificed for extensive growth to the south and west of town. Well, such is life, such is progress, I thought. However, this growth pattern started to become a real concern for me when I became personally invested in East Lubbock. I have been a Kids Hope mentor at Alderson Elementary School for the past 3 years. So every other week, I would drive across town to an entirely different part of Lubbock, a part of town that I had never really known prior to my work at Alderson. In the process, I became personally invested in the children I mentored, their teachers, their classmates, their families, their community. I also did extensive door-to-door campaigning during the 2018 election in some of the neighborhoods in East Lubbock, meeting some of our most engaged and supportive citizens. As a result, I now have a deep appreciation for these people, these families who contribute so much to our community and who deserve healthy, thriving neighborhoods, as well as access to all parts of Lubbock. At the rate we're going and given some of the current policies and practices of the city, this dream of a revitalized old Lubbock will never become reality. It is my belief that developers in areas A, F, and E can easily afford and therefore should be required to pay maximum impact fees. Old Lubbock with new developments in B, C, D, H, and G should not require impact fees. Rather, the absence of impact fees should serve as an enticement to developers to bring their creative development skills to these underserved areas of Old Lubbock. It is my hope that you will use the issue of impact fees not as a further cause of division, but as the catalyst for turning this ship around and making Lubbock, all of Lubbock, a thriving, beloved community. Thank you.
Ms. Reed, thanks for being with us. I'll recognize Robert Harper next.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Mr. Harper, you have the floor.
All right. Well, my name is Robert Harper, and I'm a resident of Lubbock and a student at Texas Tech University. And I am deeply disappointed that at the last meeting, you ignored over 70 public comments. These comments, made by concerned citizens, urged you to require the maximum impact fees for developments in areas A, F, and E. And I'm here to tell you the same thing. Why did the office holders in this town refuse to listen to their constituents? And why are the only developments that have been approved are ones in the south and southwest Lubbock? And why are the only developments that get approved ones that pad your pockets and leave the older neighborhoods to crumble and die? You have the blood of old Lubbock on your hands, and you're prepared to let this city die just to make a little extra money. The suggestions from the CIAC are nothing more than a racist sham that keeps the money with the wealthy and white and gives breadcrumbs to the rest of us. If these suggestions are approved, we are telling the people that Lubbock is still an old racist town designed to segregate the poor and the people of color from the wealthy and white. Remember, you work for the people and your jobs depend on how you treat us. And while you all say that you're working for the people, it seems like the only thing that you're doing is padding your pockets and the pockets of your friends and donors. So stop these racist suggestions and the urban sprawl to the southwest that is keeping Lubbock segregated. You're here to serve us. So do your job and stop this racism that you have helped spread, and recommend maximum impact fees for developments in South and Southwest Lubbock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Next, I'll recognize Nicholas Bergfeld.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mr. Bergfeld, you have the floor. Yes, you have the floor.
Okay. Members of the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you on the day of your final recommendations. As the author of the Disparity Report, I would also like to thank the committee for so openly operating as a special interest group masquerading as a citizens committee. Your recommendations are dead on arrival. The process of brazen self-interest that has led to these unfair and racist recommendations is publicly available for anyone to watch. Whether that be Chairman Payne's unwillingness to entertain the over 70 public comments requesting new subdivisions in the South and Southwest carry their own weight because it's his city subsidized profits that we'd be hurting, Vice Chair Andy Bean's passionate defense of developers not having to pay for water connectivity because the clients of his Lubbock Land Company are those real estate developers, or Shane Sawyer's resistance to decreasing fees on smaller, more affordable square footage homes because he builds South Lubbock luxury houses, there's enough on the public record for all of Lubbock to see what's going on. because the biggest mistake this committee made was thinking that business as usual is still happening in Lubbock. On top of that, after weeks of advocacy, imagine the bitterness we feel about your racist recommendation to exclude the East Side from reduced fees for old Lubbock roadways. Even the breadcrumbs of this committee are racist. Lubbock citizens understand these fees on developers don't come close to getting South and Southwest development to carry their own weight. Regardless of the amount that's set, there is still more to be done to turn off the spigot of public dollars that wash into the bank accounts of the individuals on this committee from exploitive land use policies. Your dead on arrival recommendations are the conversation starter for waking up Lubbock citizenry so that democracy can overwhelm your corruption. At least 190,000 citizens in Lubbock agree with our message that the South and Southwest need to carry their own weight and the sprawl must end. If there are any on this committee that feel strongly about this issue, Lubbock is watching right now. Speak out. Committee member Irene Cantu Franks, I know that you are the sole appointee of Councilwoman Patterson Harris. While your recommendations and voice have not been heard in this committee so far, I ask you not to let this meeting end until you have fully expressed how you feel. Do not vote with the rest of the committee if you are opposed to the recommendations. Join us in demanding smart growth for Lubbock, no impact fees on Old Lubbock, and maximum impact fees across the board for areas A, F, and E. Thank you.
Ms. Burfield, thanks for your time. Next, I'll recognize Erica Thompson. I'm
I don't see
sorry.
an Erica Thompson.
Yeah, she just commented that she's there.
Oh, okay. I got her.
Okay. Ms. Willingham, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. You have the floor.
My name's Erica Willingham. I've lived in Lubbock my whole life. I stay home with my 3 children while also helping my husband with his design business. Over the course of the last several CIAC meetings, I've been surprised and disappointed to see this committee ignore the call of fellow Lubbock citizens in regards to impact fees. Today, I would like to urge you once again to recommend maximum impact fees for new developments in areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for developments within Loop 289. As you know, the new growth in the south and southwest parts of Lubbock have been unfairly paid for by citizens in other parts of town by way of taxes. Instead of their money going towards much needed maintenance in their own neighborhoods, it has gone towards this new growth. There is no way to see this as anything other than discrimination and misuse of power to fill the pocketbooks of the developers. The areas of South and Southwest Lubbock need to carry their own weight. As someone who grew up in Lubbock, I know the life that these older neighborhoods bring to our city. These neighborhoods are a huge part of what makes Lubbock unique. I can't continue to sit by and watch these new suburban neighborhoods be built upon their backs. And you shouldn't either. You have a responsibility to every citizen in our city. When we put resources towards the well-being of Old Lubbock, Lubbock as a whole will benefit from it. These reasons are why the committee should recommend imposing maximum impact fees for new developments in areas A, E, and F, and no impact fees for developments in areas B, C, D, H, and G. Thank you.
Ms. Willingham, thank you for your time. Next, I'll recognize Bridget Isaac. Forgive me if I mispronounced your name.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we are. You have the floor.
My name is Bridget Krizak. I have actually only lived in Lubbock for 7 years. I came here during the time that the 34th Street was being revitalized, but have yet to see any improvement or life on that street. And since I live near there, I am concerned about what I'm seeing in Lubbock as far as not investing in the original or inner loop parts of the city. I am asking you today to consider maximum impact fees on developments outside the loop and no impact fees on new developments within Old Lubbock. I believe this is critical, that in order to create a livable Lubbock, we need to carry our own weight. This concept applies specifically to new development outside the loop. Developers who approach the city should be held to a higher standard and should know that their startup costs include impact fees. They are applying for development here because they believe Lubbock will provide them with wealth. This wealth should not occur because of any deal on impact fees. They should carry their own weight as they hope to make money from the rest of us. We must view impact fees in the bigger picture of new capital improvements and expanding the city of Lubbock. It is one tool of many that we must use to stop the exploitation of old Lubbock, as we can use our limited resources for revitalization. For these reasons, I ask the committee to consider imposing maximum impact fees on areas A, F, and E on the new developments outside the loop, and no impact fees on new developments within Old Lubbock. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being with us. Next, I'll recognize Adam Hernandez.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Mr. Hernandez, you have the floor.
Great. I'd like to address the fact that even the small concessions this committee gave in response to calls from concerned citizens, East Lubbock was left out, as is generally the rule here in Lubbock concerning that area of town and any policy of substance. Though the last few meetings have made it quite clear that appealing to the morality of this committee is an exercise in futility, I was informed by City Council that they will also be taking these public comments into consideration when voting on the recommendations of this body. Therefore, I am submitting this also for their consideration. It has been nearly 100 years since Jim Crow law infected this city in 1923 by way of bigoted individuals who thought that other humans with darker skin were somehow less than them, and therefore were not worthy of many benefits of society. Then came Lubbock's adoption of redlining and its own version of Great White Flight, once people of color could no longer be legally confined to one area of town. In their minds, God forbid they should ever be subjected to living near people of color. Then, with no data or good reasoning, special interest groups, just like the ones sitting on this committee now, said that Lubbock's growth was heading in the same southwest direction of the original move of separation from people of color, and colluded to use taxpayer money from all over town to subsidize this so-called development with no public vote whatsoever, and are still using it to pay down debt incurred by these foolish actions. It would appear that the money from people of color still happens to hold value in their eyes. Lubbock has been historically racist, and many here are still racist, and now is the time to stop this foolishness in positions of power. There is no place for that type of mentality in any position of leadership. Now is the time for real leadership that understands that when damage has been done by the policies of previous committees and city councils, that it is indeed their duty to not only stop the damage from occurring any longer, but to reverse its effects. Likewise, when someone embezzles funds for one reason or another, the first order of business is to stop that misappropriation. The next order of business is to make whole those areas from which funds were misappropriated. There should be no talk of being fair to those who orchestrated this misappropriation. Therefore, I continue to call for maximum impact fees in all categories in service areas A, F, and E, and none in any other service areas, including East Lubbock. Thank you.
Mr. Hernandez, thank you for your time. Next, I'll recognize Nick Richards.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Mr. Richards, you have the floor.
All right, great. I'm speaking once again today to ask the committee to consider maximum impact fees on new developments outside Loop 289, that's areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees on new developments within Old Lubbock, that's areas B, C, D, and G. I considered rereading my email again for you today, originally sent for the first of these meetings. However, as it has been discarded at the last two public comments readings, I'll try something else instead. I'm as real a human being as any other citizen bleeding out to be heard, especially those who cannot be here today. I urge you to do the duty you agreed to and recommend sensible maintenance policies for citizens in Old Lubbock and hold special interests to a higher standard. I'm speaking once again today to ask the committee to consider maximum impact fees on new developments outside Loop 289, that's areas A, F, and E, and no new impact fees on new developments within Old Lubbock, that's areas B, C, D, and G. I considered rereading my last email again for you today. However, as it has been discarded at the last 2 public comments meetings, I'm trying something else instead. I'm as real a human being as any other citizen bleeding out to be heard, especially those who cannot be here today. I urge you to do the duty you agreed to and recommend sensible maintenance policies for citizens in Old Lubbock and hold special interests to a higher standard. It is with this in mind that I am speaking once again today to ask the committee to consider maximum impact fees on new developments outside Loop 289, that's areas A, F, and E, and no new impact fees on new developments within Old Lubbock, that's areas B, C, D, and G. I considered reading my last email again for you today. However, as it has been discarded at the last 2 public comments readings, I'll try something else instead. I'm as real a human being as any other citizen bleeding out to be heard, especially those who cannot be here today. I urge you to do the duty you agreed to and recommend sensible maintenance policies for citizens in Old Lubbock and hold those special interests to a higher standard. I relinquish the remainder of my time, and may God have mercy on you all.
Next, I'll recognize Sydney Kime.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. You have the floor.
All right. So I was born in Lubbock. I came back to Lubbock to go to Texas Tech. And my question is, why is the mayor's salary a fraction of a livable wage? It's a full-time job and an important one. This causes the only people capable of surviving and having the job of mayor are those who have already obtained a large surplus of capital, i.e. the elite. This means that it is completely unobtainable for any normal citizen to lead. This can be seen in the past and present mayorships. Why are the people not able to be mayors for the people? Why are we forced to give our decision for guidance to the elite? Also, I recommend maximum impact fees for areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for areas B, C, D, H, and G. Why is the working class paying for the wealthy's expenses, and why can't we choose to not have them as our leaders? Stop catering to the elite and listen to your citizens. Thank you.
Ms. Kime, thank you for your time. I'm now going to circle back around to our list and start at the top again. I'll recognize Don Holliday. Mr. Holliday, are you with us now? All right, I'll move to
Thomas, he is on.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Chairman Payne, members of the CIAC, thank you again for the opportunity to share my views. I keep coming back, as I've spoken before, to the 2040 plan for the future of our city. Over 3,000 people were involved in that process, hundreds of thousands of dollars, hiring the consultancy group that led us through that. And at the heart of that is our vision for Lubbock. Our vision for Lubbock, not my vision for Lubbock, but our vision for Lubbock is to encourage infill development inside the loop, and particularly in North and East Lubbock. That's stated very clearly at the beginning of our vision for Lubbock, to improve major corridors and to protect and strengthen existing neighborhoods. In addition to that, in our vision for Lubbock in 2040, is to capitalize on Canyon Lake development and to create initiatives to energize and stabilize areas east of Interstate 27. And just for good measure, our vision for Lubbock says one more time to promote infill development. In the process of suburbanization, which has taken place over the last 50 years or longer, we have seen the need for these goals is being set and prioritized. As a person who's involved in volunteer work and has been for several years in East Lubbock with a couple of different organizations, I've seen the need there. I've also seen the energy and the positive spirit of the people who believe that something can be done to renew and revitalize their lives, their neighborhoods, and their schools. This can only be done There's concern about picking winners and losers. It's very clear that any decision that's made having to do with money, because money's a limited resource, we're going to pick winners and losers. Well, it's time to promote our goals and our visions and make them happen through the focus on the renewal and redevelopment of East and North Lubbock, as well as Central Lubbock. And we can do that very clearly by having maximum impact fees in areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees inside the loop. And with particular attention given to East and North Lubbock, because that's our vision, which we have set for ourselves. And it's a vision and a goal which I hope that you share with us. Thank you very much.
Thomas, you're muted, sir.
Oh, sorry. Next, I'll recognize Jake Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds, are you with us now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jacob Reynolds, and I am a lifelong resident of Lubbock. I'm a third-year law student at Texas Tech. At the last CAC meeting, this committee ignored over 70 voices from our community and called for reductions on impact fees in new single-family housing, apartment complexes, and other non-residential developments in areas A, F, and E in Lubbock South and Southwest. I'm here to once again urge the committee to recommend maximum impact fees for new developments in areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for developments in areas within Loop 289. Much of the new growth in Lubbock South and Southwest has been fueled by what is effectively a regressive tax on citizens in Old Lubbock or neighborhoods within Loop 289. This tax robs resources from residents of the city, especially in minority communities, and enables developers to widen profit margins while ignoring the long-term economic burdens this places on established neighborhoods. Impact fees are one important tool among many that the city of Lubbock can use to stop this exploitation, allowing the city to use its limited resources for urban renewal in neighborhoods that have seen steady decline. Even if the new subdivisions bring in property taxes in the beginning, we know that they will not carry their own weight when they begin to require maintenance. That same maintenance many old Lubbock communities are in desperate need of today, but are not receiving because our resources are being used for the benefit of suburban developers. Now, I've lived in the Wheelock Monterey neighborhood for several years now, and walking or driving around, it's easy to see that the city has largely forgotten about my neighborhood and the people who live here. Our street lights constantly go out, making it unsafe for families and children to walk or drive around. The roads are marked with potholes, and every time it rains, many of the intersections in the neighborhood and on 34th Street flood to the point of being almost impassable. Because of this neglect from the city, many of the houses that come up for sale are quickly bought up as rental properties by landlords and tenants who have little regard for their neighbors. Despite this, I believe in Wheelock Monterey's potential to be a vibrant and thriving neighborhood on par with any other neighborhood in or outside the loop. I also know that the same can be said for many other neighborhoods in North, East, and Central Lubbock. However, in order for this potential to be met, the city and its committee must ensure that new developments outside Loop 289 pay their own way so that neighborhoods like mine and those similarly situated get the resources they need. For these reasons, I ask this committee to recommend imposing maximum impact fees for new developments in areas A, F, and E, and no impact fees for new developments in areas B, C, D, H, and G. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Next, I'll recognize Marissa Huerta.
I don't see a Marissa on here.
Okay, let's try Tom Macarone.
Do not see a Tom either.
All right, and Mrs. Ayers spoke. All right, we've been through our list twice, and we've had everyone has spoken except for two. So I'll thank everyone for your time and attending our meeting and speaking to the committee today. And we'll move to the next thing on our agenda, which is to discuss the minutes from the previous meeting. I'd like to allow everybody a little extra time this time to review these comments. We need to make sure they are consistent with the motions that were made at the last meeting and the votes that were taken. So everyone just take a minute to look through this carefully. I have a couple of items that that I want to mention under section paragraph 4.6. The minutes read, motion by Salter to recommend a 6-month window between adoptions of any change to the effective date of that change. I think we need to clarify that that's subsequent to the original adoption of the ordinance. Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that was your motion, right? That would be effective subsequent to the original adoption of the ordinance. Because 4.5 speaks to the 6-month window between adoption of the ordinance and the effective date of the ordinance. 4.6 refers to the 6-month window between any subsequent changes and the effective date of those changes. Does that sound right? Okay.
That's what I recall was the intent. Thomas, Katie can verify that.
Yes, I agree with that, Thomas.
Okay. So I'd ask April that we make that change. You can just say subsequent to the original adoption ordinance, and then the rest of it is correct.
So Thomas, what is the change that you want to make there on 4.6?
Well, I believe it would be accurate to say that the motion was that subsequent to the original adoption ordinance.
Which had a year, right?
Well, I thought this is my understanding was the intent was that motion 4.5 was to lay the effective date from the adoption of it to the effective date was 6 months. And then 4.6 was if there's any changes after that initial adoption, that those changes would also have that 6-month delay.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Is subsequent to the original adoption. That's what I'm suggesting we add in 4.6.
So just to add after initial adoption, is that what you wanted to add?
Subsequent to the adoption of the ordinance. Any subsequent changes that are made, that we recommend a 6-month window between the effective date, between the adoption of the change and the effective date.
April, do you have what you need with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Does anyone see anything else? Katie? I'm sorry. So April, in section 4.9.
Yes, sir.
On the 4th paragraph that starts with, the 4th line of the paragraph that begins with master plan projects.
Yes, sir.
I think the word expended needs to be added between funds and toward. So it should say improvements or funds expended toward construction of system facilities.
Got it.
The point number 5
is presentation. Then there's a paragraph, consultant Whitaker. Then there's motion by Salter to exempt impact fee charges on properties for change of use. Seconded by Bradley. Motion approved 7-0. Does that need its own place? It seems like it should be above 5, is like maybe a 4.10.
Yeah, that's where it actually occurred in the meeting, and so we weren't real sure whether we move it up. It happened after the presentation. We're happy to move it up.
Here, just call it. Yeah,
Could we
it looks like
label
it does with 5.
5.1? Andy, would that suffice?
What's that?
If we labeled as above where the motions are numbered,
Mm-hmm.
we numbered that motion next to the word motion 5.1, would that suffice?
Something like that would be good. It looks like it goes with 5, so we're giving it its own bullet.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on what change needs to be made.
Just add the 5.1 next to the motion and indent it over to line up with the motions above that are numbered 4.4 through 4.9.
So 4.9 needs to be 5.1?
No, April, under 5, where it's the motion by Salter to exempt the very bottom of the page. Just
Okay.
simply add 5.1 to that, and that covers it.
Okay, thank you. I was confused, sorry.
Yeah, and then move it over to line up with the indentions above.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Any changes we need to make? All right, subject to those changes being made, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Ms. Bradley, thank you. A second?
Second.
Ms. Salter, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are adopted. So our next item is to discuss and take action on the final report. It's been posted for a few days. Has anyone observed anything in the final report that seems not consistent with what we've expected and discussed? Nor have I. That being the case, would someone like to make a motion to approve the final report to be submitted to the City Council?
Actually, Thomas, if you wouldn't mind, just have the motion on the approval of the final report, not whether it goes to City Council or not.
All right, let me rephrase. Would anyone
Thank you.
like to make, yes, ma'am. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the final report?
So moved.
Motion.
Mr. Bradley, thank you. Second from anyone?
Second.
Mr. Bean, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Cantu Franks, was that an aye from you? I'm so sorry. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so you're voting aye?
Against, yes, I'm voting no.
So you're voting no?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm voting
thank you.
no.
I just wanted to be sure that I understood you correctly. All right, so that motion passes 4-1. With that accomplished, Mr. Whitaker, I'm going to turn to you for a discussion of the ordinance process. You have the floor.
Hey, Thomas and committee. I may turn this over to Kelly for items on the ordinance. What we've done is we've taken all the motions that have been received in the last meeting that were approved and started drafting a draft ordinance. And those have been put together and have been submitted for legal review with Kelly and her team. So I'll turn over to Kelly to talk through the ordinance process.
All right. Ms. Leisure?
Thanks for the surprise, Jeff. Okay, so Jeff has condensed, excuse me, all of the recommendations and votes that you all have determined and voted for in this process and provided them to us. And he's proposed a draft ordinance. And now what our office will do is review them, not only to make sure that they are consistent with what you all voted on and approved, be it, mostly policy considerations or what the fees what you would like to see them set at, et cetera. But then I just have to make sure that they're also, the ordinance is brought forth in legal compliance with our state law, which here it's chapter 395 of the local government code. And then the city council will be setting a hearing on August 25th. They'll set the hearing date for the public hearing on the consideration of adopting impact fees. So at that point in time, we'll have a better understanding of when this issue is actually going to city council for consideration. And at that point, the ordinance will be finalized and will be posted in the city council's agenda at least 3 days prior to the date of that hearing. Does that cover it, Jeff?
I believe so. I think what we were trying to summarize for the committee is that what needs to be available from your recommendation to the public and the votes that were going forward and how the process will occur from this point on for the committee.
So Kelly, let me take a shot at this. Am I correct in understanding that from this point, your vetting and development of the ordinance does not necessarily require any further interaction with this committee, that you could prepare that ordinance and submit it to council if you so choose, without being required to submit it to this committee, notwithstanding the fact that if you chose to, you could do so? Is that a fair statement?
Well, so you are correct the first half there in that everything, so I don't know how to say this accurately other than recommendations from this body are required to go forward to the council in an ordinance. So any votes that you all have taken, any policy considerations that you have made, all of the recommendations that you all have made will be in the body of the ordinance. If, just like, your recommendations on the land use assumption and maximum, or the capital improvements plan that goes to council, at that point, if they have something that they don't agree with the recommendation or have other thoughts, then they could change it at the council meeting. Our office is not inclined to publicly release legislation prior to it going to the city council meeting. That can cause a lot of concerns. Often there are variations of ordinances that are published and posted and that aren't fully accurate, etc. So it's our preference and not to release those ahead of time before it goes to city council because of the numerous problems that it can create for the city.
Understood. So I'll try it a little differently. My understanding is that at this point, you would not anticipate the necessity for this committee to meet again as relates to the preparation and submittal to the council of the ordinance. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So does anyone have any questions about that, by the way? Anyone on the committee? Okay. So the last topic that we need to discuss is the preparation of the committee recommendations letter that is to be submitted to the city council in regard to the final report. There are a couple of ways to do this in regard to the letter pertaining to the interim report that was submitted. The committee wanted to have a meeting and have that letter submitted for review and vet that letter, have a discussion, and formally approve it. The other option would be to approve at this time. My preparation of that letter as the chairman of the committee, and if that's done, then we would not have to have another meeting solely for the purpose of vetting that letter. I'm equally happy to do it either way. I'd like to submit that to the committee for discussion.
I would like to have a separate time to review your draft to vet the letter and agree on it before we submit it versus agreeing on it today that it's something I have not seen.
Andrew Franks?
I agree. I think that once you drafted your letter, it would be a good idea for us to see it before we submit it. That way we are all on the same page as to what's being put before us to the council.
That's my preference as well. So, and I appreciate your comments. That would allow us to more formally approve that letter as a committee.
And just as a reminder, Thomas, that
yes.
That has to be to council. You have to make those recommendations, provide them to council a minimum of 5 business days prior to the public hearing. So we don't know the exact date of the public hearing yet. We think it's going to be sometime end of September, 1st of October. Obviously, it can't be any earlier than September 30th based on publishing when they call for the date on August 25th. So we've got time, obviously, to get that letter drafted and to meet again, but just to be aware that we've got to make sure that at the minimum gets to council 5 business days prior to when that public hearing is by state law.
And the earliest date of that public hearing would be what?
I think September 30th is probably the earliest date, but I know there's already a special called meeting on the 30th. So I would anticipate it's probably gonna be the first week in October, but I don't know that for sure. But since they can't call it until August 25th is when they'll set the date, and it takes us time to notify the papers to get it published. And so that weekend would be the earliest that we could post. I'm trying to look at my calendar here.
So I'm going to ask everyone to look at your calendar. I would prefer to go ahead and set this meeting today if we can, rather than having to find everybody later. Anytime in the latter half of September would fit Mike's summary of anticipated schedule. So are there any dates from, say, September 10th to September 30 that are preferable to any of the committee?
And I would think, to be safe, Thomas, you probably need to shoot for the week of the 14th. That way you definitely have plenty of time. You could get maybe to the early part of the following week, but.
So by the 18th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's do it this way. How about between the 7th and the 18th? That's a 2-week period. Are there any days that don't work for anyone?
The 7th is Labor Day, just FYI.
So that was wide open, Katie?
Yeah, wide open. Were Mondays good? Shane had a particular day of the week that was better or worse.
Yeah, Monday was bad for him.
Monday's bad, okay.
Don't remember what day was better for him, but I know Monday was not a good day.
I'll take a stab at September 15th. It's a Tuesday. Let's say 3:30.
All right. Any objections to September 15 at 3:30?
Tuesday afternoons are bad for me. Sorry, Andy.
That's okay. I was just
All right.
about this. Well,
Let's
the
throw the
17th,
dog Thursday, Andy. What do you
yeah,
say?
the 17th at 3:30.
All right. How does that work?
I have a meeting at 4, another meeting at 4.
How about one?
But I can do that morning, our old time, like 10 o'clock or what it used to be, 11.
All right. Let's look at Thursday morning. I think this won't be more than an hour meeting. How about Thursday morning, the 17th at 11?
The 17th?
Yes, sir.
It's good.
Any objections? All right. April, if you would mark that on your calendar, September 17 at 11 a.m. And if you would follow up with Mr. Bean and Mr. Sawyer and see that they're aware of that date and see if they can put it on their calendar as well.
Do you mean Mr. Hill, Thomas?
What did I say? I said Mr. Bean. I'm so sorry.
I think Andy's good.
Yes, Mr. Sawyer and Mr. Hill.
Mr. Payne, just to let you know,
Yes, ma'am.
for the sake of the meeting, it may or may not be allowed to be Zoom at that point, but we'll try to let you know in advance as soon as we do know.
All right. We'll be prepared to act as necessary. And thanks for letting us know. All right, so the only order of business that I know of that we need to have on our agenda for the next meeting is discussion and approval of that letter. Is there anything else that anyone thinks that we need to have on that agenda? Kelly, is there anything that you would need us to put on that agenda?
No, sir.
Mr. Keenum?
No, sir. I think that'll wrap us up.
All right. Mr. Whitaker, I'll ask you before we adjourn.
Once we get those comments, we're good to go.
Okay. I want to thank everyone again for all the time you've spent. And it has been a lot. And thanks for hanging in there as you have. Jeff, thank you. And I neglected to thank Andrew last time, but I want to thank him this time as well. I apologize for neglecting you last time. And Heather, you too. And Kelly and April. And Mr. Keenan. With that, I'm going to adjourn us for today. I look forward to seeing y'all after a little break in our meeting schedule. Y'all have a good rest of your day.